Don't get me wrong. Jesus and the cross, it's the pinnacle, it's the highlight of human history. But there are other things that we can be talking about as long as they ultimately lead us back to Jesus. Recently, Matthew Holst wrote an article defining the difference between Christocentric, talking about these other things that lead us back to Jesus. I look like Artaxerxes, or are we just talking about Jesus and the cross at the exclusion of everything else? He came up with a short list of ifs. I would like to share those if statements with you. If you are attending a church like this, you are either Christocentric or Christomonic. Here is the list from Matthew Holst. When the law is preached in our churches, as it must be preached, and the exclusive application is, you can keep the laws, but Jesus has, you're probably sitting under Christomonic ministry. Let's say the sermon text is the Ten Commandments. Exodus. You're making your way through Exodus. That would be a cool thing. The pastor reads through the Ten Commandments and goes, wow, that's a really heavy list, isn't it? And you and I can't keep that list, but Jesus did. He died on a cross so that you could have your sins forgiven. Did the pastor say anything wrong? No, he did not. Did he miss a couple of things? Yeah, he did. How's about the law reveals to us the character and the nature of God? How's about without the law there is no knowledge of sin? How's about the effect of the law when we break it? How's about the punishment, the penalty for not keeping God's laws? How's about the law was not the best system, but the new covenant was? How's about the law was a quid pro quo system and explains why God did things that he did to the Jewish people all throughout the Old Testament? You see, there is much that can be said before we get to, you can't keep the laws, but Jesus did. And if we're just being Christomonic, we're missing all of those things, and we're not being very broad Christians while still remaining Christocentric. Here's another if for you to consider. If you almost exclusively hear that as a Christian, your works are not acceptable to God and do not please him, you're most likely sitting under a Christomonic ministry. Again, you're almost exclusively hearing that your works are not acceptable to God and do not please him. Now, I want to hear that a lot. The key word here is exclusively. That's not Christocentric, that's Christo only, Christomonic. If statement number 3, if you hear little to nothing of the love of the Father in saving sinners, you're probably under a Christomonic ministry. Hey, remember, Jesus died for sinners. We love that. But why did he go? Because he was sent from the Father. Why was he sent from the Father? For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. If all you ever hear is about the love of Jesus at the cross and you never hear about the love of the Father, you're under a Christomonic ministry. Heretical? No. Needing a tweak? Probably. Another way to know that you're under a Christomonic ministry, if you rarely hear application in preaching, you're probably sitting under a Christomonic ministry. Now, be careful on this one, but if you're never hearing calls for you to grow in sanctification, calls for you to alter your course, to change your way, and this is how you do it, it's probably Christomonic. Why? Because it's all about reminding you you're forgiven. Isn't it great that you're forgiven? Isn't it wonderful? You can relax, you're forgiven, you don't need to do anything, you've been forgiven. All of those things are right and true, but they're at the exclusion of an application how to work it out in sanctification. And finally, from Matthew Holst, number 5, if someone says, I don't want to be told what to do, I want to be told what Jesus has done for me, that's Christomonism, not Christocentrism. Are you starting to get the gist? And how this is a somewhat fine line, but a line that needs to be drawn nevertheless.